Everyone went crazy this past week when Michael Saylor hinted that he is printing out a green circle instead of an orange, which means he wasn't necessarily buying Bitcoin. There was a lot of speculation. Were they selling Bitcoin? And then a giant FUD about Tether came out saying that they're selling Bitcoin as well. But it turns out that everybody was wrong. But something very unique happened this past weekend with Michael Saylor and MSTR that leads you to believe that this Bitcoin Treasury strategy is going to slow down drastically in the year 2026 because of what we've been seeing. I'm going to dive into all of this, but first, let's call out all the FUD spreaders for actually lying on the internet, saying that all these things are incorrect. The first one I want to call out is Peter Schiff, who said that it's the beginning of the end of MSTR. And what Michael Saylor had to say in his initial presentation from today, and I'll dive into some of the specifics that I listened to that I wanted to show you guys all today as well. What Peter Schiff is saying here is absolutely false. I mean, because what Michael Saylor and MSTR is doing is raising these preferred stock equities that allow them to pay dividends, and they actually just increased their offer for this dividend. But I think the unique part about all of this is that MSTR has been having a terrible year, but yet they're still able to raise billions and billions of dollars fairly easily and apply that dividend so regularly. But the crazy thing about all of this is that JP Morgan is now trying to compete with MSTR, trying to offer some of these Bitcoin bonds and trying to attack Wall Street. So everybody was saying, oh, this attack on MSTR, it forced MSTR to now sell Bitcoin. It forced Saylor to sell the most pristine collateral on planet Earth. But again, it didn't happen. And let's take it a step farther. Tether. Everybody was saying, oh, there's a 30% decline in gold plus Bitcoin position. And because Tether was buying a ton of gold, now they're not looking to buy Bitcoin and that they're selling Bitcoin. And we even had friend of the program, this crazy Australian, say some big FUD here about Bitcoin or about MSTR as well. So we'll listen in to the FUD that Luke Mikic is spreading over there.
JP Morgan just forced some of the biggest holders of Bitcoin to sell. We had some new rumors circulating this morning that companies like MicroStrategy and Tether, we can see here, Arthur Hayes is claiming that a 30% decline in gold and Bitcoin could wipe out their equity, forcing them to sell. So are these rumors true about Tether and MicroStrategy? Again, the MicroStrategy debate is heating up after.
So the MicroStrategy debate is incorrect, folks, because Michael Saylor bit that in the butt within minutes of his presentation. Of course, he's built the world's first digital credit vehicle, and this is what he's been describing this whole time. As he's been going on and on about how MicroStrategy is now utilizing traditional financial system to offer exposure to Bitcoin to people who might not have that. And with that, they are going to utilize Bitcoin, the most pristine collateral that it is, in order to offer dividends and take on a part of the $300 trillion global bond market, the $145 trillion fixed income market. And they're going to be doing all that with Bitcoin. But the problem is Bitcoin is having its worst November to date, actually the second worst November to date. So during Saylor's entire presentation, they announced that they raised and formed a $1.44 billion USD reserve and an increase in its Bitcoin reserve to make it at 650,000. So it was a small buy, but the unique thing about this is that they built up this cash reserve. And before they kept saying, you know, cash is trash. I want to have Bitcoin. I want to utilize and get and obtain as much Bitcoin as humanly possible. So why did they now all of a sudden start to utilize cash in all of this, especially when we have Bitcoin at such low prices? You would think Saylor would want to load up on Bitcoin exposure, especially if he believes so heavily in the asset. And he thinks that it's a Black Friday sale. He tweeted it out himself. But the unique thing is that now this gives MSTR runway so they do not have to sell their Bitcoin. And I think that this is the biggest thing that is out there, is that MicroStrategy now has 650,000 Bitcoin on its balance sheet, more than every other publicly traded company combined. It's full stop. There's number one, Michael Saylor, and then there's nobody basically remotely even close to MicroStrategy. And so they have to deal with a lot of this volatility, but they're offering a lot of the different preferred stock equities and convertible notes. And a lot of these require dividend payments. So some of them, at some point, if Bitcoin drops, they might have to sell their Bitcoin in order to fund those dividend liabilities. So they came up with this genius plan. If we can raise money at the drop of a hat, why don't we just have a war chest of cash here that could pay off this dividend for, let's call it 21 months. And so it would allow basically Bitcoin to go down for nearly a year, longer than a year and a half, a year and 3/4. And so they don't need Bitcoin to rush up and absolutely skyrocket in flight, as I love to say on this channel. And to take it a step further, they have so much Bitcoin, and because their MNAV has fallen below 1, and for those at home who don't know what MNAV is necessarily, MNAV is basically their Bitcoin holdings compared to their overall market cap. And it's the first time in history that MicroStrategy's entire market cap has fallen below the value of their Bitcoin holdings. So it makes you think that, hey, if they've got so much Bitcoin on their balance sheet, why is it falling down? And it's because they've had to keep converting, and everybody in Wall Street has been basically guessing, is this able to keep on running? I believe that Michael Saylor is able to do that and that they're able to show it. And with this, they're showing that even in a bear market, they would have USD dividends for 1 3/4 years. They need Bitcoin to just hit 10.3% to reach escape velocity, where they essentially would never need to sell Bitcoin. They have Bitcoin dividends available for 74 years. And if Bitcoin drops to 10.4% or $10,400, that's how much their dividends are for the next 74 years. Is that basically they would have to start selling if Bitcoin gets down to that 10,400 level, which is absolutely crazy. And so Bitcoin would need to go down by like 20% every single year in order for that to be quote unquote stalled. But everybody's now asking, okay, now that they're doing this money raise where it's in dollars and not in Bitcoin, what's going on? Are they going to sell? What's the problem here? Well, it's helping cover those financial obligations. It's avoiding those Bitcoin sales at all cost, which Michael Saylor has come out and said that he wants to avoid selling Bitcoin at all costs, right? He says, and I quote, "It's going up forever, Laura." And so because he's saying that, right, we're 100% going to see Michael Saylor hold on to Bitcoin as much as he possibly can, right? And so when you continue diving in, this actually looks like a very smart plan, especially with what we've been seeing from the Bitcoin Treasury companies. Because let's look, right? Their market cap has fallen billions beneath its Bitcoin holdings. So everybody's panicking. It suffered a catastrophic start because it dropped another 10%, I believe, today. But it's exposed the company to renewed concerns about leverage, liquidity, investor confidence. But Saylor put all those concerns to bed with this slide right here, where he said, hey, we don't got to worry. We don't have to sell. But like I said before, the difference between Michael Saylor and MSTR and the second place Bitcoin Treasury company is basically 650,000 Bitcoin, 600,000 Bitcoin, a little closer, right? Strategy at 650,000. Then the next closest has 53. Look, I love Marathon. I think that they're doing great trying to hold on to Bitcoin that they're mining. But I mean, let's be honest here. they're not going to be catching MicroStrategy anytime soon. So the Bitcoin Treasury company strategy, or the Treasury company strategy, has drastically slowed down. And we've seen it. I had Checkmatey on the podcast, friend of the program. He came out and said, basically, we've seen all these Treasury companies come online and essentially have one Bitcoin buy and then get out. They've had one raise and essentially say, okay, we're not buying anymore, right? So it makes you wonder, why are they doing all of this? Well, it's because it's the volatility. They want to make sure that their stock spikes. But I've been saying it all along, and saying it with all of this, is that we need to basically have companies that have a viable business buying Bitcoin. We can't have these treasury companies coming in and buying and get over leveraged, which is what we've been having. A lot of companies come in, get over leveraged, and we've actually seen one sell Bitcoin. And so this would cause a crash in the market, which would cause a lot of craziness, to say the very least. So make sure you guys are smoking that like Cheech and Chong, and hitting that subscribe button for me, because I'm going to keep diving in to the Treasury strategy and what this actually shows for the rest of the Treasury companies here, because I think it is very unique when you take a step in and you look at where things are going. Because when you take a dive in to this Bitcoin Treasury strategy and you see what is actually going on with MSTR and all of these others, you're seeing that the treasuries have stopped buying. They stopped their quote unquote relentless buying. So it's got to ask yourselves, why did they stop this relentless buying? This quote unquote relentless buying, right? Well, it's because of the initial volatility. People think that Bitcoin was going to go up drastically, myself included. I was incorrect about that. I'll be completely honest with you guys. I mean, I think we all got caught into the hype thinking that Bitcoin was going to start running this year, especially towards the end of this year. And what we're seeing is that, unfortunately, Bitcoin had its second worst November in history, coming in at negative 17.67%. The last time, this was in the 2018 bear market. So this cycle has been unlike anything anybody in Bitcoin has ever expected. And I think that's a big part because we have Wall Street in. And so when we have Wall Street in here, we're going to get a lot of volatility. But I do love this dip as well. And you guys shouldn't be selling. One of the unique things about this dip is that you'd think a lot of us plebs here in the chat would be buying Bitcoin. But we've actually seen the number of wallets with 10 million sats or more decrease, which means plebs like you out there are selling, and the number of institutions with 1,000 Bitcoin or more have been buying. So the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and it's just like traditional financial wealth inequality. So we can't let Bitcoin turn into that. So please, for the love of God, folks, do not sell your Bitcoin. If you need liquidity, use Salt. Go to saltlending.com/green-candle. They've got a Salt Shield for these dips, but they've also got some of the best rates in the industry, starting at 9.95%. If you guys go to saltlending.com/green-candle, they're going to give you guys an exclusive offer. You could use the promo code GCSALT-01. So you could go there, unlock it, do it quickly, because if you want to unlock some capital, folks, you don't need to be selling in the midst of this bear market, because the Bitcoin treasury boom is slowing down. Public companies just added 14,000 Bitcoin to their balance sheets in October, the lowest monthly total of 2025. 63% drop from September. So these private companies allegedly are adding less, but I mean, you don't really know the private companies, obviously. But it's all because the MNAVs of these companies are falling below 1, so they're unable to raise more money, and thus they're unable to sell, or unable to raise money to buy Bitcoin, excuse me. And these Bitcoin treasury companies are essentially a levered play on Bitcoin, or at least that's the narrative. So because these are somewhat, levered, so to speak, on Bitcoin, everybody thinks, oh, when Bitcoin goes up, they should drastically turn up. But what we've been seeing is that strategy has not been doing that. The promo code is GCSALT01, I believe. I appreciate it, All Nighter Hider, the GOAT. And as you guys are saying, yes, it makes no sense why they are selling, but unfortunately, we can't all be as smart as the green candle listeners here in this chat and all of you plebs out there watching. Because for some reason, people just think, oh, you see Saylor going in and being like, oh, let's buy Bitcoin. And it's going up forever, Laura, forever. And then, when truth comes to shove, they're selling Bitcoin. And these Bitcoin treasury holders, they're dropping. Right? So if we look at the Bitcoin wallets with 0.1 Bitcoin, I'll pull this up here from the friends over at Bitcoin Magazine Pro. You can see as Bitcoin started, as the price was going, they started selling towards the end here, folks. What are we doing? I mean, this is crazy. Bitcoin cracks above 100K and everybody's like, oh, I'm outie. Now, luckily, they're starting to come back in. It looks like a little dip above after it got down to 82. We had some people buying back in. But for the love of God, folks, do not sell your Bitcoin. Because we got Peter Schiff spreading all of this FUD out here. We even got Arthur Hayes saying that Tether is selling Bitcoin. And look, you guys know, just as I do in this chat here, that Tether is one of the most profitable margins by a company in history. And then we got Stretch, after another rate hike, is now giving you a 10.75% dividend, which is absolutely insane. This is better than you could get for any savings account anywhere. So at this point, I mean, you guys are going to be watching as Bitcoin is just going to be taken off. And while Bitcoin is running and these yields just keep exploding, we're going to be watching Michael Saylor keep on stacking Bitcoin. Because with the way that Saylor and with the way that these yields are working, I mean, nobody's going to be catching them at this point. But these big banks are paying attention. I already told you guys plenty of times in the last couple live streams about JP Morgan. But what else are we seeing? We're seeing Vanguard, the biggest issuer of an ETF of any company, now enabling their clients to buy Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin related products. So all of these guys are very interested in what is going on, and they're saying, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, we need to be able to make some money off of this Bitcoin thing. Because BlackRock has seen it as been the most successful Bitcoin ETF in history, or the most famous ETF, let's call it, not just Bitcoin ETF. We've had the most famous launch. We're seeing the explosion of all these loan products. And yet Bitcoin is still just at 86,000. It's the fastest asset to ever reach $2 billion in market cap. I mean, the bullish sentiment can just go on and on and on here. And if you look at the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges, you see that something interesting happened. Not only did the number of wallets with 1,000 or with 10 million sats go down, but 30,000 Bitcoin got taken off exchanges here. We see it go down to 2.1 million. And they're all getting taken off exchanges. So during this dip, it's interesting. The big dogs bought, the small dogs sold, and they took it off exchanges. So this is what generally happens in traditional wealth, is that during a recession, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. 2009, the rich people were all buying up all these dilapidated homes, all of the homes that fell very low. Then you saw the massive amounts of money printing, basically 0% interest rates. And what happened? Well, the rich people are profiting like crazy off of their home values. And let's face it, these home values that are an equity, that's not real. I mean, it's just literally money that's sitting there. Your home theoretically should lose value because these walls here, these lights here, the fridges, the chairs, everything, it gets worn down over time, right? But the opposite happens in real estate, and that's what I think we're seeing here, right? Is like in the short term, maybe we're seeing some fluctuation in digital real estate if we want to make that comparison. And Bitcoin, if you look at the fundamentals, it's all stacking up. So be like the big dogs and get your Bitcoin off exchanges. And if, because you guys are listening and live with me on December 1st, if you buy a new Treasury Safe 3 or Safe 5 before December 3rd, you get 40% off. That's right, 40% off. So you guys got to hurry up because this Black Friday sale ends on the 3rd. So you got to hurry. They're over in Europe. So it's probably already the 2nd over there. And then if you buy the new Treasury Safe 7, you also get a free wireless charger. So go there because I am using Trezor to protect my Bitcoin during this bull run. And I love the Safe 7 because it's got the Bluetooth feature. I travel all the time, so I want to be able to access my Bitcoin, but also keep it off exchanges. I want to make sure that it's safe and secure. So Trezor's the place to do it, but I can't stop there, folks, because if I had my Bitcoin seed phrase written on a piece of paper and say people were just messing with my backpack, or my backpack gets water spilled on it and it ruins that seed phrase, I lose my generational wealth. So that's why I back it up with steel. It's fireproof, crush proof, you name it. And they've got a big Black Week is what they're calling it offer. And you could go to cryptosteel.com/greencandle, use promo code greencandle for 10% off your entire order. And you guys got to do that quickly because you got to be like Michael Saylor, folks. You got to be like the Bulltard, just buying, finding out ways that you can completely avoid selling your Bitcoin at all costs. And this is what he lined out here today. Their entire Associated Press established a $1.4 billion USD reserve in order to avoid selling Bitcoin. As much as Saylor hates the cash is trash, I think this is an advantageous move. And he kind of announced that he was doing it beforehand, but everybody was speculating that, hey, this is a move where they're going to be selling Bitcoin. That's why they put the green dot. But no. They're really just stockpiling cash to make sure that their Bitcoin on the balance sheet is even more indestructible than before. So be sure you guys are smoking that like Cheech and Chong, hitting that subscribe button, telling a friend to tell a friend, and go check out my other great video I just put up today about the potential of the United States working with the UK on some sketchy things in this crypto task force. So go ahead and check that out, and I'll catch you guys all on the next one.